Welcome to More to Explore, and we're going to be looking at an event, the College of Global Futures. We are looking tonight. The College of Global Futures itself is brand new. It just launched this summer. It's the home of three different schools: the School for the Future of Innovation and Society, the School of Sustainability, and the School of Complex Adaptive Systems. I'm your host, Bridget Bavasset. I graduated from the School of Sustainability in 2008 and now teach some courses as well as study abroad classes. Why would you think of Global Futures as a degree program? We look at how it translates into career opportunities. In the United States, only 1 in 4 adults have a job related to their major, to what they studied in college. In the School of Sustainability, the School for the Future of Innovation and Society, we're seeing that about 72% of our graduates have a job directly related to what they studied in school. We ask our alumni, 60 days after they've graduated, have you got employment yet? And then we ask that second question, is your job related to what you learned with us? So we're constantly shaping our program to make sure we're meeting the needs of an ever-evolving job market. We teach in a transdisciplinary format so that when we look at a problem, we'll think, how would an engineer approach this? How would a businessman? How would a social scientist? How would a policy and governance worker? And when we get those wider perspectives, we get better, longer-term solutions. All of our students are looking at current complex problems and working on solutions to solve these, and it's real-world experience. So if you're in the College of Global Futures, you're going to be working with internships before you graduate, capstone research with local companies or international projects before you graduate. Our study abroad programs have service learning components. My students in Costa Rica volunteered at a wildlife rescue center working with sloths, working with the Costa Ricans who manage this. So on their resumes, when they graduate, they've got all these beautiful experiences that employers love to see when you're in a job interview, to see that you've got those world experiences. This is kind of a quick snapshot of the three programs of School of Sustainability, the School for the Future of Innovation Society, and the School for the Complex Adaptive Systems. There's 5 bachelor degrees within the College of Global Futures. What's important is that you find what you're passionate about, what you want to study, because then you enjoy what you're learning and you get out and you get a job that you're going to enjoy. So in the School of Sustainability, there's a Bachelor of Science. That's like energy, materials, and technologies. It's also like economics and corporate sustainability, the science of ecosystems. We have a Bachelor of Arts degree that can focus on society and how humans interact with the environment. Policy and governance is a huge role. International development and sustainability of how we can better build, as we were just talking about, of not pouring concrete onto wetlands. And that's a part of sustainable urban dynamics, to make sure that cities have not only those basics, energy, water, clean public transportation systems, and be able to provide medical services, be able to have affordable housing. That's all a part of city dynamics. The newest degree that we have at the School of Sustainability is a Bachelor of Science in Sustainable Food Systems. This is what I'll be talking about tonight. It's looking at the role of food systems because we have a growing population, more people we need to feed, and yet we have less farmland in the world. The School for the Future of Innovation and Society has Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science degree, again, focusing in on what you're passionate about. They look at journalism, the psychology of technologies. Do technologies harm most people's population, or do they cause wonderful benefits? And where's that balance? Just as an example, the driverless cars, are those good or bad? And try to figure out how we can have sustainable, innovative systems taking us into our future. The College of Adaptive Systems is currently a graduate program. However, with a bachelor's degree, you can get a certificate in biomimicry there. And the biomimicry is just amazing application. So tonight, dinner for 9.6 billion. I'm going to be talking about the challenges of global food supplies, like the loss of farmland, how deforestation affects our food supply, climate change affecting our food supply, and policy and governance. We're also going to be looking at the benefits of what we can do if we farm more within our cities. Urban farming is amazing because we can use less water for agriculture. We're not transporting food all across the country. There's fewer greenhouse gas emissions when we eat the food that we grow locally. Benefits of urban farming are also fewer pesticides and chemicals. And there's also cleaner air quality for our cities. And we'll give examples of that. There's a YouTube channel that we have, and there's an amazing talk that I recommend that you take a look at. Professor Kathleen Merrigan talked about how COVID-19 unraveled our food systems. It's an incredibly beautiful and honest look at how that transportation system broke down. And you may have seen in the news where dairy farmers were dumping milk, or migrant workers were at stay-at-home orders and couldn't be picking crops. And on the other end of the spectrum, food banks were just needing so much food, but the farmers couldn't get it there. So I encourage you to check out Kathleen Merrigan's talk of how COVID-19 unraveled our food system. Here's the whole reason why this is so important. In 1960, human population on Earth first hit 3 billion. Everyone's excited, woohoo, 3 billion people on Earth. Maybe never in all of Earth's history have we had 3 billion people. By 1999, we had passed 6 billion in human population. We more than doubled the number of humans on our one planet in just 39 years. That's 2 generations. Did we double our water supply? No. Did we double land space to grow food? No. We doubled in population, doubling human needs. We're not growing that quickly anymore, but we're still heading to 9.6 billion. We're going to hit that number in about 30, maybe 28 years from now, definitely by the year 2050. And that number is important because they call it carrying capacity. When there are 9.6 billion people on Earth, and we all need water, food, affordable housing, jobs, medicines, we're going to be competing for resources. So the whole aim of the College of Global Futures is to make sure that when we get there, that we'll be okay. This is our lifetime. This isn't just some future problem for our descendants. This is us in about 30 years from now. So we're going to make sure that we're able to find alternatives. If we lose a resource, find something else that'll work for us. Find other ways to grow our foods. As one example of how food systems are being affected right now by climate change, you can see those countries where there's yellow. That's kind of known as the coffee belt around the world. That's where countries are growing coffee. There's 60 tropical countries that do this. It's about 25 million farmers around the world. All of those countries are struggling right now. I took study abroad students to Cuba to coffee plantations, and they're at about 30% production because it's drier and hotter. I took students into Costa Rica last year. We went up into the cloud forest to a coffee plantation, and they're struggling. This affects not only the people who grow these crops and those of us who enjoy coffee and cocoa, as a matter of fact, those 2 crops, but it also affects the economies. If Jamaica can't grow and sell Blue Mountain coffee and their economy crashes, does that affect the whole global market? Absolutely. This year, I was scheduled to teach in Cambodia and Vietnam. All of our study abroad programs this year were canceled and moved to next year, and then we'll see what's happening next year. But what we're going to do when we do get there to Cambodia and Vietnam, we're looking at countries of historic resilience facing a future of rising seas. Salt water expands as it warms, and that's a part of climate change where this water is expanding and it's flooding out these countries. We found out in Vietnam, a lot of the rice plantations are being flooded out by the salt water because of rising tides. So in a way to adapt to this, a lot of the Vietnamese farmers started growing shrimp instead of rice. The good news is they're still farmers. They're still producing a crop. Shrimp is actually more valuable, so they're making more money. The bad news is rice is one of the top 3 foods in the world. So if we don't have areas in the world where we can grow rice, That's a huge hardship because rice is so affordable, much more affordable than shrimp. So we look at challenges of how can farmers adapt, maybe still grow rice as well as shrimp. And a lot of what we do at the College of Global Futures is called collaboration. It's a key competency. We look at how can we learn from other cultures, other parts of the world, share strategies and technologies to move forward more sustainably. When I took students to Cuba, the class was called Cuba Unlocked and on the edge of rapid transitions. I first went there in 2017 when the travel opened up for us. I was there in 2018. It started to close again under the current administration. But for the 2 years that we were there, we were looking at how Cubans struggled. In the 1992, I think when the Soviet Union left Cuba, they left quickly and they took all of their agricultural equipment with them. They had been parked there with their nuclear weapons during the Cold War, during the Soviet Union Cold War. I lived in South Florida, so we had drills at my school to hide under the desk for nuclear bomb drills. When the Soviet Union left Cuba, they took all their equipment with us. There was an embargo with the United States and Cuba, and other countries who were allies of the United States were not trading with Cuba either. So now you have an island nation. They are not trading with anyone in terms of food crops, and they're trying to just grow their food, and it was a big struggle. This was all part of the Castro's regime. So my students were looking at policy and governance, and there was actual food scarcity. So we had the trade embargo from 1977. It was reestablished gently in 1992, but it came back in and it was an embargo strong again. We had that other small opening I just talked about, 2016, 17, 18. But part of this food supply situation is when Soviet Union left in 91, they took that equipment with them. In 2018, Cuba had a record-breaking 4.75 million travelers. That's because when the window opened in 2016, when Obama had opened that up, all of a sudden these cruise ship companies signed contracts. I want to take people to Havana. So suddenly all these tourists were coming into this island nation wanting to have a delicious dinner, wanting to be in Havana and have delicious food, but yet there wasn't enough food really to feed the Cubans themselves. So it was interesting for us. We stayed with host families. So we were living in the houses with Cubans who had been through the regimes of the Castros, you know, since early 1960s, and they understood about this food scarcity. Good news, the tourism was bringing in money, much needed money to the Cuban economy. The bad news is we were costing them on their food supply. So it was a big paradox for them. One of my students took this photo. All the Cubans get a ration book called a libreta, and it just provides basic food. So typically, as a Cuban, the government will give you 1 egg a month, 1 chicken leg a month. Obviously, you can't live on that. All of our host families had chickens in their houses. It was illegal for them to do this, but the government never arrested anyone because you have to eat. So my Cuban mom was trading eggs with a neighbor who was growing guava. You know, it was just a trade system that they were doing just to survive. When we look at how food supply is affected by deforestation, there's so much slashing and burning going on. You might remember recently in the Amazon, this was in the news about how the rainforest was on fire. People in Brazil were just in a world of hurt with their economy, and they were so hungry. Brazil had so many struggles, they still do. But their option was to increase farmland and increase ranches by slashing and burning the Amazon forest. If they had a ranch, they could grow cattle and feed the local people, as well as make some money by selling steaks. They could grow food and be able to trade again. The problem with this, of course, is that the Amazon is considered the lungs of the earth. So all of us on the rest of the world, all these other countries were telling Brazil, stop doing this. The Amazon is such an important supply of oxygen to the planet. And if you just slash and burn it. We're all going to be suffering from this. But it's a little bit of an ethical challenge here. Who are we to say, all of you Brazilians, you need to starve, you shouldn't be having a good economy because you need to protect this rainforest. You can't be slashing and burning it. So there was a system called Payment for Ecosystem Services. What if all these other countries who depend on this air, it's an ecosystem service to have oxygen in our atmosphere, what if we paid Brazil to protect this rainforest and to conserve it? These are options that we can be looking at as solutions. I'll show you real quick back and forth. So this is now, and then this just shows you the difference of how we're losing so much of the rainforest and what the projections are in terms of climate change. This is just an idea of how urbanization affects food markets. If you picture where you've lived for most of your life and you think of maybe how did it look 10, 15 years ago, you might think of, oh yeah, there used to be a farm down this road, or there used to be an orchard over here. And maybe now it's a housing development, or it's a new office supply building. We look at how around the world cities are building out. We're literally pouring land on pouring concrete on land that used to grow our food. This map is just showing how city populations are building out so much. This is where I'm sitting right now. I'm sitting in Chandler, Arizona. That top picture is a satellite image of Chandler in 1989. And just 20 years later, you see that all those farmlands, those were cotton farms and citrus groves, they're basically gone. The city developed, and this was 11 years ago, and now you don't even see the farmland anymore. We've just built out. So the question is, that growing population, less land, how do we feed people? At the College of Global Futures, we bring in amazing guest speakers. We've brought in Nobel laureates, we've brought in Pulitzer Prize winners, we brought in people who maybe grew up in a ghetto and made something beautiful of their neighborhood or their city just by hands-on attacking some issue that needed to be solved. We've also brought in the next Secretary of the Navy, and from the previous administration, the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. Two of the things he said, in fact, he came twice into the School of Sustainability. Two of the things that he said that were really striking is that almost half of our food in the US just ends up in a landfill. If you picture before March, when we used to go to restaurants so often, think of all the food waste from restaurants that just got dumped into a dumpster at the end of the night. His other point was that less than 1% of Americans claim farming as an occupation. So when we look at that percentage of the US farmers, percent of the labor force, it's like 0.9%. And you can see how quickly it dropped. At the turn of the century, more than a third of Americans farmed as a living. So this huge depletion of people actually working farms compared to growing population is a huge challenge. So this is an example of an innovation, a solution that can lead us towards a more sustainable global future. When we get to that 9.6 billion, again, this is you and me, this is our lifetimes. 3/4 of us will be living in a mega city, which is 10 million or more. So if you can imagine that, New York City is not a mega city yet. So picture a city bigger than New York City and living there, and how huge that is. There's already dozens of mega cities all over the world. Most of them are in Asia, where there's at least 10 million people in one city. So when we look at how we're going to feed that many people in an urban area, we do vertical farming strategies. That building on the right is an image. That building doesn't exist. The one on the left in Tokyo is an actual building. So many ancillary benefits to grow food this way. The best, most wonderful benefit to this is that this is aquaponics and hydroponics. So we can grow food using only 10% of the water that traditional farming took. We can save 90% of the agricultural water supply to do this. That's a huge benefit because we're already seeing lake levels dropping and aquifers drying up, and water issues are a huge concern all over the globe. So we can protect water supply to grow food this way. Another benefit that surprised us, these crops actually insulate the buildings. So tenants of these buildings saw that their electric bills dropped. They're using less energy, which is really important because then that's fewer greenhouse gas emissions in the air if it's a coal industry or a fossil fuel industry. Another huge advantage in Chicago, there's 2.5 million square feet of urban farming, rooftop gardens and vertical farming structures. Chicago noticed a drop in respiratory illnesses because these plants take carbon out of the air and put out fresh oxygen. So this is something where it's a huge benefit to have more urban greenery in a city. It's just better for respiration of its tenants. In Houston and near that Mississippi Delta near New Orleans, you may have read about or you're maybe familiar with the oxygen deprived area. It's a long, huge, hundreds of miles swath of sea life that can't exist. It's called eutrophication. It's because all the farming chemicals, farms in Arkansas, Missouri, all those pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers, rain might wash it into the Mississippi River. It comes down the Mississippi River, empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And in that area of the oxygen deprived area, no shrimp, no sea life whatsoever. The fishermen have to get past that into the Gulf of Mexico just to catch fish. So when we do vertical farming, we don't need pesticides, chemicals, and fertilizers because this is not soil-based. So this is just one of those wonderful, amazing innovations that we're starting to see more of. And when we talk about transdisciplinary, this is like an engineering solution. You've got the elements of corporate businesses, investing in this. It's policy and governance to make sure that zoning allows more of urban farming to to be up and running. It's all transdisciplinary. This is a picture of my students with me in Cuba. They're doing a lot of urban farming in Havana. If you look at that picture on the right where you see like plastic bottles, the yellow, the white, and the blue, we were wondering about those because those are just plastic bottles that he had upside down, and we thought it was a part of a watering system. I asked him about it, and this Cuban farmer smiled. He said that he had a lot of bugs eating his tomatoes and his food crops, and there's no pesticides or chemicals available in Cuba to purchase. So he got those plastic bottles and he coated them with a cooking oil, put them in his garden, and the bugs get stuck to the oil. They're attracted to the colorful bottles. But this was just a man with a piece of land who wanted to grow food, and he had this idea of how to solve a problem with his bugs. When we look at urban farming in Singapore, I was scheduled to teach there in May, and that study abroad has been postponed to next year. Singapore is one of the top 11 most sustainable cities in the world. And you can see by that beautiful picture, they use nature and greenery all over the city. It's just amazing at how they incorporate it, and it's embedded in their culture. They've got rooftop gardens and farms, and any vacant lots are not vacant. They become a farming area. They're growing beautiful flowers or plants. There's all kinds of fish farms anywhere within a city. There are a lot of beautiful stuff happening around the world. And again, when we look at collaboration, we can look at beautiful examples like this of how to do better. So the Bachelor of Science in Sustainable Food Systems, it leads to careers in food and agricultural sectors. Students can be innovative problem solvers who understand those connections between food and natural resources and policy and the economic opportunity and social equity. Social equity is just making sure that all of us have the access to what we need. When I mentioned earlier about food deserts in Los Angeles, like with the Ron Finley TED Talk, when you live in an impoverished area or a low-income area, Ron Finley's talk mentions, that there aren't even any grocery stores because they were being vandalized. So you just had to get on a bus if you wanted to buy groceries. Social equity just ensures that everyone has access to the food that they need. So when we look at how that degree translates into the actual bachelor's degree of leadership or just food procurement, global engagement of this, how public and health and nutrition is an area of study as well about what we're growing. Business and innovation is a huge part of this, finding ways to grow our food so efficiently. Policy and governance, again, the zoning and ecosystem services, how it's all connected. So this degree, you're going to learn a real world context. So students are required to have a capstone, research with businesses, or to have internships. We have local area farms that students can volunteer at or do an internship study. It's a practical solution. Every solution may have some unintended consequences. We have to anticipate what those might be prepared to adapt. A lot of what we study is about adaptation. You know, everything's kind of changing, so we've got to be able to find a way to adapt and keep a strong solution up and running. And we always emphasize that critical and systems thinking skills. So we were looking at all the complexity of food systems. Again, the talk by Professor Kathleen Merrigan that's on our YouTube channel talks about how connected, you know, the distribution system was and how we can do better should this happen again. So one of the beautiful things with Arizona State University, we're working on helping countries achieve their sustainable development goals. The United Nations set out 17 of these. They address poverty, hunger, health, education, all these 17 goals, where we are the 5th in the world at helping countries achieve this. It's amazing, 766 institutions working on this, and ASU is the 5th in the world. We're #1 in the United States. Only 3 American universities even made it to the list. But this speaks to the fact that, like with study abroad programs, we have students out there that are working on real world problems. This is our contact information. If you want to take a screenshot here, we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, again, this is our information for both Colin and I, and anytime you have any questions during the process to come and join us, or the application process, we're College of Global Futures, and then you can look at School of Sustainability and Future of Innovation Society and see what's good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening.